All right, so today we're diving deep into language interpretation and learning. You sent over some fascinating sources that I'm really excited to dig into. I mean, think about it like high stakes UN meetings
Hmm.
or bustling foreign markets. Situations where the right words at the right time can really make all the difference.
Yeah, it's amazing how much power lies in language, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's really exciting about these sources is that they don't just talk about the theory, they actually offer practical techniques that can help anyone improve their language skills.
Yeah, that's what I love about a good deep dive. You always walk away with some actionable insights. So, one of the first things that jumped out at me was the distinction between simultaneous and consecutive interpreting. I always thought of them as basically the same, just with slightly different timing. But our sources suggest there's a much deeper difference.
You're right, it's not just about when you translate. Simultaneous interpreting where you're processing and translating in real time requires an incredible amount of mental agility. It's like trying to juggle 5 balls while riding a unicycle. You need exceptional focus and coordination.
I can barely chew gum and walk at the same time, so that image definitely paints a picture. So, if simultaneous interpreting is this mental marathon, how do people even train for it? Our sources mention 5 techniques for practicing with literature, but one that really stood out to me was practicing with audio recordings.
And there's a good reason why that method stands out. It's the closest you can get to replicating the pressure and demands of a live interpreting situation. I remember using a similar technique when I was training for a particularly challenging assignment. I would record myself interpreting speeches and then compare my performance to the original, meticulously analyzing every pause, every inflection.
So it's about recreating that game day pressure even when you're practicing solo. I like that approach. Now, these sources also dive into the world of YouTube as a language learning tool, specifically for simultaneous interpreting practice. Again, they mention 5 techniques, but the one that caught my eye and seems to echo what we were just talking about is recording yourself and comparing it to the original content.
It's all about that feedback loop, isn't it? By recording and comparing, you become your own language detective, uncovering subtle nuances and identifying areas for improvement. It's like having a personal coach in your pocket, constantly pushing you to refine your skills.
I love that, a language detective. Now, what about pushing beyond the screen and the page? The sources also highlight the benefits of real-world immersion, things like attending cultural events and joining language exchange groups. I'm sensing a theme here. It's about finding ways to step outside that comfort zone and apply your skills in dynamic, unpredictable environments.
Exactly. Language isn't meant to be confined to textbooks and classrooms. It thrives in those spontaneous moments of genuine connection and cultural exchange. Think about it. You could spend hours studying verb conjugations, but nothing will prepare you for the thrill of navigating a real conversation in a foreign language.
I can definitely see how those real-world experiences would accelerate the learning process. Now, here's where things get really intriguing, the concept of backtranslation. The sources describe it as translating something into your target language and then translating it back to the original to check for accuracy. To be honest, I'm a bit skeptical. Does that really work?
It might sound counterintuitive, but back translation is incredibly effective. It forces you to engage the language at a much deeper level. Think about it. You're not just translating words. You're wrestling with the nuances of meaning, ensuring that the essence of the message is preserved.
So you're essentially becoming a linguistic bridge builder, carefully reconstructing the meaning on both sides. I'm starting to see the appeal.
It's like solving a puzzle. You break down the original message into its core components, translate those components, and then rebuild the message in the target language. This process strengthens your understanding of both languages, and it helps you identify any gaps in your knowledge.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. I'm adding back translation to my language learning arsenal. And speaking of expanding our toolkit, the sources also suggest taking familiar stories and modifying them, maybe changing characters or tweaking the setting, as a way to further enhance language skills.
That's a fantastic technique for breaking free from rigid translation patterns and fostering creativity in language use. Imagine taking a classic story like Cinderella and reimagining it in a futuristic cyberpunk world. Not only is it a fun creative challenge, but it also forces you to think critically about how to express familiar concepts in new and exciting ways.
I'm already picturing Cinderella trading her glass slipper for a pair of cybernetic boots. And this idea of storytelling, cultural context, and language all seem to tie into another fascinating theme from our sources, the connection between language skills and diplomacy.
It's a crucial connection. Diplomats operate in a world where words can make peace or incite conflict. They need a deep understanding of not just the literal meaning of words, but also the cultural nuances, historical sensitivities, and subtle power dynamics that shape how those words are received.
So it's like a high-stakes game of linguistic chess, where every word carries weight and consequence.
Exactly. And our sources highlight the importance of diplomats possessing knowledge from fields beyond language, like history and psychology. It's about understanding the context behind the words, the unspoken motivations, the cultural baggage that each person brings to the table.
It sounds like a diplomat needs to be a bit of a mind reader, picking up on subtle cues and navigating those unspoken cultural currents. Do you have a real-world example of how this might play out in a diplomatic setting?
Imagine a diplomat negotiating a trade agreement between two countries with a long history of conflict. Understanding that historical context is critical. A seemingly innocent phrase or gesture could inadvertently trigger past resentments and derail the entire negotiation.
It's like walking on eggshells made of historical sensitivities.
And that's where psychology comes in. A diplomat skilled in reading people can recognize subtle signs of defensiveness or aggression, allowing them to adjust their approach and steer the conversation in a more positive direction.
It's fascinating how all of these skills, language proficiency, cultural awareness, historical understanding, psychological insight, all come together in the world of diplomacy.
And what's even more intriguing is that these skills are valuable not just for diplomats, but for anyone navigating our increasingly interconnected world.
Okay, mind officially blown. But before we get too carried away, let's take a pause here and come back for part two, where we'll delve deeper into how these skills can translate into a wide range of careers and personal pursuits. Stay tuned.
And we're back, ready to explore even more of these fascinating connections between language, culture, and communication.
I'm ready to dive back in. We were just talking about the crucial role that history and psychology play in diplomacy, and I'm eager to hear more about how those fields intersect with language skills.
It's all about context. You know, a diplomat might be fluent in a language, but without a deep understanding of the culture's history, values, and social norms, their words can easily fall flat, or even cause unintended offense. It's like trying to navigate a city without a map. You might know the language, but you'll likely get lost.
So it's not just about what you say, but also how you say it and why you're saying it in a particular way.
Exactly. Think of a diplomat attending a formal dinner in a foreign country. Knowing the proper etiquette for seating arrangements, gift-giving, or even how to hold your chopsticks can be just as important as knowing the language itself. These seemingly small details can communicate respect and understanding, or, conversely, signal a lack of cultural awareness.
It sounds like cultural awareness is a kind of secret code that unlocks deeper meaning and builds trust in diplomatic settings.
Precisely. And our sources emphasize that this kind of awareness goes beyond simply memorizing facts about a culture. It's about developing a genuine curiosity and empathy for the people you're interacting with, being willing to listen and learn from their perspectives.
It's about seeing the world through different lenses, understanding that our own cultural assumptions aren't universal.
And that brings us back to a technique we touched on earlier, backtranslation. Not only is it a powerful tool for language learning, but it also fosters this kind of cultural sensitivity. When you backtranslate, you're forced to consider how a message might be interpreted from different cultural perspectives.
So backtranslation isn't just a language exercise, it's a cultural awareness exercise as well.
Absolutely. Let's say you're translating a marketing slogan from English to Japanese. A direct translation might convey the literal meaning, but it could miss the subtle cultural nuances that resonate with a Japanese audience. By backtranslating, you can catch these potential pitfalls and ensure your message is received as intended.
It's like having a built-in cultural sensitivity filter, helping you to craft messages that bridge cultural divides rather than widening them.
And that brings us to another fascinating idea from our sources: modifying familiar stories with different characters and contexts. This technique not only enhances language learning, but it also encourages you to think critically about how cultural perspectives shape narratives.
We touched on this earlier with the Cinderella in a cyberpunk world example. It sounds like a fun way to play with language and culture.
Exactly. It's about taking something familiar and twisting it, bending it, reimagining it through a different cultural lens. What if Romeo and Juliet took place in a futuristic society where arranged marriages are the norm? Or what if the Odyssey unfolded in the vastness of outer space?
Those are some great prompts. I can see how this exercise would challenge you to think beyond your own cultural assumptions and explore how different societies might interpret the same story.
It's a reminder that stories are powerful tools for transmitting cultural values and beliefs. By playing with these narratives, we can gain a deeper understanding of how different cultures see the world.
And speaking of seeing the world, our sources highlight a quote that really resonated with me. It emphasizes the importance of not letting praise or criticism dictate our self-worth. It seems especially relevant in fields like diplomacy and language learning, where feedback is constant and can sometimes feel intensely personal.
It's a crucial lesson. Whether you're negotiating a peace treaty or simply trying to order a meal in a foreign language, you're bound to encounter setbacks and criticism. It's easy to internalize those negative experiences and let them erode your confidence.
So how do you develop that kind of resilience? How do you keep going when you feel like you're constantly hitting a wall?
I think it starts with recognizing that feedback, even when it's harsh, is an opportunity for growth. Instead of taking criticism personally, try to view it as valuable data. What can you learn from this experience? How can you use this feedback to improve your skills?
So it's about shifting your perspective, seeing feedback not as a judgment of your worth, but as a tool for improvement.
Exactly. And on the flip side, when you receive praise, try to savor the moment. But don't let it inflate your ego. Remember that every success is built upon countless hours of practice and dedication.
It's about finding that balance between humility and confidence, acknowledging your achievements without letting them define you.
And that balance is essential, not just for language learners and diplomats, but for anyone navigating the complexities of life.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and learning from our experiences. But before we get too philosophical, let's take a quick pause and come back for the final part of our deep dive. We still have so much to unpack. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into language and communication.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered already.
I know, right? From the nuances of interpreting to the power of cultural awareness. But now I'm really interested in exploring the practical side of things. Like how can these skills translate into actual career paths?
Well, the sources we've been discussing actually paint a really compelling picture of the career potential here.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about diplomacy, of course,
Hmm.
and journalism, but those are just a couple examples. The ability to speak multiple languages, to understand cultural nuances, and to communicate effectively. It really opens doors to a wide range of professions.
Okay, so give me some more concrete examples.
Sure. Imagine yourself as a global marketing consultant, helping businesses tailor their campaigns to different international audiences. Or picture yourself as an intercultural communication trainer, equipping individuals and organizations with the tools to navigate cross-cultural interactions successfully.
I like that. It's amazing to think about how these skills can help bridge cultural divides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one career path that particularly stands out to me is that of a language technology specialist.
Oh, interesting.
These are the folks who are at the forefront of developing innovative tools for translation and interpretation, really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the field.
Wow. So they're like linguistic architects shaping the future of how we communicate.
Exactly. And as we consider all these possibilities, it's important to remember one of the key insights from our sources, the importance of self-awareness.
Right?
They emphasize that no matter what path you choose, your ability to handle feedback, both praise and criticism, will be absolutely critical for your success.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially in fields like interpretation and translation, where you're constantly being evaluated. It must be tough to find that balance.
Yeah.
To stay confident, but also be open to learning and growing.
It is a delicate dance. You need to be open to feedback, of course,
Mm.
and willing to learn from your mistakes. But at the same time, you can't let every bit of criticism chip away at your confidence. It's about developing that thick skin while staying true to yourself.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between humility and confidence.
Exactly. It takes time and practice to develop that skill.
Ah,
But when you can approach feedback with curiosity and a bit of detachment, it becomes a tool for growth rather than a source of self-doubt.
that's a great point. And it makes me think about another theme that's come up throughout our conversation today, the importance of curiosity.
Yes.
It seems like that insatiable desire to learn, that willingness to explore and discover, is really at the heart of everything we've been talking about.
I couldn't agree more. Whether you're deciphering ancient texts, or navigating the nuances of a foreign language, or simply having a good conversation, curiosity is what keeps us engaged in the world around us.
Well said. And on that note of enthusiastic exploration, we've reached the end of our deep dive. It's been an absolute pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise, I always enjoy our conversation.
Sure. Me too. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as we did. Remember, the world of language is vast and full of fascinating discoveries waiting to be made, so stay curious, keep learning. And until next time, happy exploring a